Radio 1 is a station of principle, so you better try, don't listen no other station. We have everything you want and need, just because we put everything under one umbrella. So keep listening, Radio 1 are the realest thing. I share the marks of that.
Did you find any distinction between the Jamaican environment and the UK's environment?
That's a really good, interesting question. As you probably realise that we are in a global economy now. We all are. Things happen very fast, and stock market changing in Tokyo one night will mean the stock market changes in UK and in New York the next day. We're all part of that global economy, and we can't avoid that. So some of the problems, I think, here, not problems, some of the issues here are very, very similar to we have in the UK. We do recognise there are particularly Jamaican contexts that probably are quite specialised to you and to other neighbouring countries. So, for example, your tourism industry is a really important one,
yes.
And I think could well be more important in the future. So things like that I think are quite Jamaican. One thing I didn't say in the talk today, and we did use an exercise asking what Jamaican icons the outside world will see in Jamaica.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about your flag, we talked about red stripe, we talked about the rum, I must keep away from drink and not just drink. We talked about your beaches, we talked about your athletes, and a number of other things like that. Two things I think we missed out when we were talking about it, we had a list of categories, was one, your hospitality.
Okay.
And I think that's really important. I've visited here a number of times over the last 5 or 6 years. People are both so helpful, will happily talk to you in the street in a way that wouldn't happen in the UK.
Okay.
And that's quite different, and I think that is a very positive image that you give. And I think also probably the family is very important for you as well.
Yeah.
So those are the things I think that are quite Jamaican, that are not perhaps not quite so emphasised across the world. So I think they are particularly Jamaican. But a lot of things are global, and I would say again, I think making sure that your young learners in schools don't give up mathematics and statistics, but continue studying it, is probably for your future prosperity really important.
Alright, Professor Burghes, perhaps internationally there's a concentration on STEM, that's science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Within our national context or local context, we have realized that there's a fear factor as it relates to mathematics. So what are some of the strategies to sort of combat these challenges?
That only can be, I think, combated in a longer term model. You can't overnight change attitudes. I think crucial to that are helping primary school teachers recognise both the importance of mathematics, not just numeracy but mathematics, and helping them get a better understanding of the subject. That can only be long term, it can't be short term. And you can certainly think about your students here going into teaching. You want them to have a very strong feel for mathematics, what the subject really is about, and I talked this morning about mathematical thinking.
Okay.
You want students to be able to not just get sums right, but to understand the thinking behind
process,
to take the process itself. Yes. So there's no quick answer, but I think the answer does lie in improving primary practice.
Okay, so in essence, it should start as early as possible from early childhood level.
If you look at what we will call the mathematically high-performing countries around the world,
Finland and so
on, they put a really strong emphasis on helping their young learners, and there's a very strong feeling that anyone who's lagging behind will get extra help. So in other words, teachers are funded to be in school in the afternoon when there isn't any school to actually help them.
Okay.
So there's a very strong parental link between the parents and the school, and this idea that there's a trust in the school and in the teachers, but they are funded to actually help the ones lower down who are not keeping up with the learning.
Okay.
And you've got to remember, I didn't say this, it was one of the bits I didn't get to today because it was an audience, a lot of high school children, but I would have said, if it had just been educationers, I would have said the people at the bottom ability strand who tend to be almost left out,
The weakest
ones,
yes.
if you don't put it right in the very early years, there will be a drain on your economy in the future. They will be the people who will be unemployable in the future, and therefore be turned to crime, and therefore you're back, they end up in jail. I mean, that's the worry, and then you'll cost the country more money. So Finland had this idea that the ones at the bottom, we've got to just get up to a minimum level so they can be employable and therefore have a future in the prosperity of the country and not be a drain.
Okay, so you're saying in a sense there is a direct link between mathematics or education and the economy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think I can be quite definite in that. It may not be. You have to be very careful.
Yes.
Because we had a survey in the UK that came out with the fact that if you did mathematics right through what we call A-level or Cape mathematics,
yes.
So people who left school with Cape mathematics qualification earned on average £10,000 a year more than other people.
Okay.
Now, you've got to also remember that some of those people doing mathematics were the brightest students.
Right.
So they were, so you have to be very careful. Very careful in your conclusions.
Yes,
but
yes.
I think that there'll be very strong evidence. Yes, to have a well educated workforce, young people going to the workforce, not just mathematics but English as well.
Yes.
That is really important for your economy.
All right. Well said, Professor Mico.
One quick question, Professor. What are some of the challenges as it relates to mathematics you think students and maybe people in general face in Jamaica, and suggestions on how these challenges can be addressed?
Gosh, that's a wide question. I think it almost goes back to what I was saying. I mean, I can only speak in having had so many wonderful times in Jamaica. And I have to say, perhaps sometimes being a bit naive about even going out at night and not feeling afraid. And I drive in Jamaica.
Okay, fair enough.
And so in some ways, there are dangers in all societies. But I do think that going back to what I said earlier, you've got to look carefully at education. I think education gets you out of the problems you've got. If you've got the development, particularly in the Far East, what they've all done is invest in education. So there isn't an undercurrent of students, young people who just give up school. They're not interested, and therefore they're the ones who cause more problems, the gang culture, and more problems later violence. So I think it is education, I think, is the only real answer to that. And it's long term, not short term. But I think that's where I think it's important that we don't somehow allow them to get left behind when they're in school. So they don't end up, by the time we get to high school, just wanting to not go to school. I probably don't go to school. You want to make sure they are engaged in education, even if they don't have parents who are supporting them, because they may well come from homes where there isn't strong parental support. It should be school that does that support and provides the sort of the means for them to get out of the perhaps poverty they're in at the moment.
Right.
Now, I'm not an expert in this area.
But I was referring to mathematics per se, the challenges with mathematics education.
With mathematics education, I think that your biggest challenge is to improve mathematical understanding in the primary sector, which means a massive what we call in service for your teachers. They need help, not to make them feel a failure, but to make them understand they need to know about mathematics. So in other words, that means when they're teaching mathematics, will know where the subject's going to, know what's important, and therefore can actually generalise and almost provide a better mathematics recipe for their students. Okay, I think that's your number one problem.
A research was done, and it showed that many teachers, they are teaching mathematics, but they were trained to teach mathematics. So as it relates to the quote-unquote delivery, they wouldn't be as strong as a trained educator.
And I think the worry is we have exactly the same. So don't think you're alone. You're not. We have exactly the same. We struggle in many of our secondary schools in England to find well-qualified mathematics teachers. We tend to take a lot of teachers in other disciplines, numerate disciplines, and retrain them as maths teachers, because that's, we have just like you have, we have a shortfall in well-qualified secondary maths teachers. So we put money into investing, taking people who are in other subjects that at least they've got some numeracy, but then trying to turn them into maths teachers. But it's less than perfect. It's not a long-term answer. A long-term answer has to be you start at the primary and you get more people both interested in mathematics and ensure they don't give it up, but keep that interest up. And that requires really good, effective teaching. And indeed, almost what I call inspirational teaching, so that your primary teachers not only teach what they should teach, but they inspire their children and can be really enthusiastic about what they're doing. They're big challenges though. Yes. But I think that is, it's not dissimilar to England. We're doing exactly the same, but we are now looking really strongly at how to improve practice in the longer term, that is starting at primary.
It's interesting that you mentioned practice. So Professor Burghes, how practical should mathematics be? For example, teachers, should they take the students outside of the classroom onto the playing field to sort of show them, mathematics in action?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the more what I call, I think, particularly lower down, in primary schools and even beginning of your high schools, I think, yes, taking mathematics in the outside world is really important. Unfortunately, sometimes the curriculum, and I know your curriculum here quite well, doesn't sort of encourage that, and we therefore tend to stick with the book and the page and so on. But I do think, I think again that's part of training. It's part of what Mico, I hope, is doing with new coming teachers to look at the outside. I can remember when I was here about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had someone who did rap with mathematics. He was fantastic. It's actually just looking at different ways of enthusing your students. So yes, it's really important, and I think my last point I made in the meeting today was that you need the government to recognise its importance, and therefore to do things, publicise it. Actually, because young people do listen to other things, and if the sort of stories are that maths is really important in the news, that I think is really important. But equally well, I think the government has to put funding into the people who are working
in service.
Yes, and it won't happen unless someone actually does make money available to do it. So I do think it's not just simply saying it's important; it's doing something to make it actually happen.
Right.
Okay, Professor. All right, Professor. In closing, if you were to identify the three most important qualities of a mathematics educator, what would those be? Three most.
I think they should love their subject.
Love for the subject is important. Yes.
I think they should also love teaching.
Love teaching.
And I also think that I won't use the word love. I mean it in its widest terms. I think they should love their pupils, their learners. That is, they like working with young people.
Okay. So the main motivation should not be salary related, but be love for the area.
I don't mean that salary isn't important. It is, but I actually think before salary comes this wanting to be actually really loving the subject, want to be a communicator. And although we're in a teacher training establishment, I'm in a teacher training establishment, I think we all recognise that many people are born teachers. Yes. They're the ones we need to capture and hopefully improve. And I think you've actually got to really like working with young people.
All right then, Professor Burghes from the University of Plymouth, UK. You mentioned earlier today that the mathematics, of course, is important for national development. So Professor Burghes, on behalf of the Mico University College, Radio 1 Mico, right, we want to say thank you very much for taking the time out to be interviewed, and we wish for you a safe trip back to UK.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
My
you.
colleague, Mr. Mackenzie. Just remind our listener that Research Day at the Mico University College continues until about 7 p.m. later. There'll be several there'll be other presentations, robotic demonstrations. There's also a lunchtime concert at 12, and there's also sports demonstration and other research presentations. Again, we say on behalf of Radio 1 Mico, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is Raging Fire, representing for Radio 1 Mico. Tune in, sing. On Judgment Day we'll be playing music for the rebels, yes. Roots rock reggae music playing sweet in heaven. Radio 1 Mico. Tune in, sing.
Diversifying the way that we do things. You know, Jamaica, known for robotics, you'd never think that in a million years. But then mathematics is the center pole of that phenomenon. I'm just interested to see what's going on.
Alright. This morning we had an interview with Professor Burghes from the UK. As we close, listeners, this morning we had an interview with Professor Burghes from the UK, and I asked him if he were to recommend 3 things that Jamaica could implement as a way of ensuring that students develop this love for mathematics. What would you recommend? Just 3 things.
3 things that Jamaica could implement to what?
To allow students to love mathematics and to take away that fear factor.
Money. Food.
Yes.
And what my math teacher said, using indigenous ways to teach mathematics. You know, you have to find ways to stimulate the mind early and to get them to fall in love with it. I love mathematics. I hated English. I was not an English student. And for me to love mathematics, I loved how fast I could to make it competitive.
Yes.
They used to do something earlier in common entrance called mental ability. And they should have always kept that.
Yes.
It was a good mind game to play. And to get mathematics.
No video.
You hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
Yes. I am.
Jody.
Yeah? You're hearing me?
Yes.
Alright, great.
Turn off the video, please. I'm going to call you back.
Alright, cool.
Jody.
You hearing me? Hello?
Yes, you're live.
Alright.
Just give us a brief description of what is happening down there right now.
At the moment, students are moving up and down. I think some of them are gone to the lecture theatre. Not sure what's happening in there at the moment. The setting is basically idle at the moment.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. The setting is basically idle at the moment.
So, you will call us as soon as something happens, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Looking around. Alright?
That was Jody, Jody and Dale, one of our reporters on the ground. As you said, down there is basically idle at the moment, so we're just waiting to see what's happening, and we'll continue to bring you the coverage of Research Day 2015. So just continue to listen to some music, and we'll be right back.